Champ, just when you thought things couldn't get any worse for the Baltimore Ravens, it did. They lost 44 to 10 against the Houston Texans. CJ Stroud, 23 to 27, 244 yards, 4 touchdowns. Mind you, the only interesting stat, Champ, because we all know how bad Houston's offensive line is. He was only sacked twice in that game.
Damn.
He was only sacked twice in that game. Nick Chubb, your former Georgia Bulldog, didn't ask to do that much, 11 carries, but he did have 61 yards, an average of 5.5 yards a carry, including a touchdown. CJ Stroud only had 1 yard, but for 1 carry, but for 30 yards. The Houston Texans had 167 rushing yards. Baltimore gave up a total of 417 yards on offense and 44 points. Champ, Baltimore, without question, has to be the biggest disappointment in football because we had them as a top candidate to come out of the AFC, especially coming off the disappointing playoff game against Buffalo. All the acquisitions that they made from drafting Malachi Starks, they also got DeAndre Hopkins and stuff. They got to fire Zach Orr. By the way, you see the new former defensive coordinator from the Baltimore Ravens, who is now the head coach for Seattle. He's done a damn good job with this team, and that Baltimore's defense is worse. They in Dallas, they're like the worst defense in football as far as with yards, points. They're losing their soul, man, because when you think Baltimore, you think their days of defense from Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs, Haloti Nada, Tony Siragusa, rest his soul. And it's looking, oh my God, it's just looking that damn bad, Chap. What are your thoughts?
They're the Houston Oilers of this generation. They didn't take advantage of their opportunity. They didn't take advantage. Twice they've had a chance in the playoffs in order to advance. I mean, and you could blame Lamar, but that's what happened when you don't play with the urgency that you need to play for. You end up in situations like this where the window is at least for the year, closes. That's why you got to take advantage of every opportunity. If you remember correctly, Houston, much like the Baltimore Ravens, was one of the most talented teams in football in the early 90s, led by a legendary quarterback in the form of Warren Moon. And remember, in 93, they had everything going against them. They had everything going for them. They not only was bringing in the top offense in the league, they were out there high Buddy Ryan, one of the greatest defensive minds of all time. They was able to go from 1-4 to a 12-4, get a bye week and go into the playoffs. And guess what? Joe Montana's last miracle beat them. Baltimore Ravens are the Houston Oilers of this generation. They have all the talent in the world. They have good coaching, regardless of what you think about John Harbaugh. They have good coaching, but they're not playing with the urgency that they need to play with at this point. And guess what? When you don't play with the urgency that you need to, then things like this happen, and it sets you back at least a year. You can't blame drafting. They drafted some of the best players in the draft. They had a hell of a draft. Can't blame it on. Before Lamar Jackson went out, they had one of the top offenses in the league. So you can't blame it on the offense. Although Lamar is culpable, is going to be held accountable because he is the quarterback. Can't blame the offense. They're doing everything they needed. They did everything they needed to do prior to Lamar going out. But when you think about the team as a whole, not having the urgency in order to complete the task and understanding the assignment of winning the Super Bowl, much like Houston did back in the early days. And much like Houston, they have a litany of Pro Bowlers in Baltimore. At one point they had like 12. I think they had 10 Pro Bowlers at their peak last year.
Let me look that up.
I think they had 10, 12 Pro Bowlers last year. Much like Houston Oilers did back in 93. But I really think they're there to and look, much like and they have a hell of an offensive minded coach. I would know that. He won my
9.
team.
No,
Yes.
they had 9. The 9. They had 9 Pro Bowlers named to the Pro Bowl, which is the most since like what 2019. I'm reading.
Yes. Much like the Houston Oilers. Or if you want to get a little bit deeper and go modern day times, the San Diego Chargers. Legendary quarterback, good coaching, good defense, good offense, legendary running back. Legendary. Just not able to get over the hump. And if they don't get a Super Bowl with this team, arguably one of the most talented teams in history, much like the Oilers, much like the Chargers, then they're not going to be remembered kindly, especially Lamar. One of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the history of the game, 2-time MVP. Could have won his 3rd one last year. Had one of the greatest seasons to not win the MVP because not only did he throw for over 4,000 yards, had 40 touchdowns on the 4 picks, had over 900 yards rushing. One of the best seasons that you're not going to see win an MVP.
Outside of Drew Brees in 2011.
Outside of Drew Brees. One of the best seasons. I mean, offense. And then you have one of the best running backs, arguably in modern day times, since LaDainian Tomlinson and Adrian Peterson. Had one of his greatest seasons, 1,900 yards. The only running back in NFL history to rush for over 1,900 and not win a rushing title. Yeah, they're going to be remembered for the Houston Oilers of this generation if they don't get it done. And I get the feeling if they are not able to, that tagline, them being the Houston Oilers or the San Diego Chargers of this generation, I think it's going to be that. Like I stated, they have the talent. They have the coaching. They've had the coaching. But when you don't get it done and show urgency in certain times, you're going to get put behind the 8 ball. And unfortunately, it's just Baltimore's turn at this point. And the thing is, there wouldn't have been a better time for them to capitalize than this year. Joe Burrow was out. You really don't know how the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to do at a certain point where Aaron Rodgers at the helm. Cleveland didn't have a quarterback. They don't have a quarterback still. They're 1-4, have one of the best defense in the league, don't have a quarterback. There would not have been a more perfect time for them to win a division and run away with the division and win a Super Bowl other than now. Instead, they're sitting at 1-4. Like I stated, last team that went 1-4 and made the playoffs and got a bye week was the Houston Oilers. But unfortunately, they're going to be remembered right now as the bad version of the Houston Oilers. A lot of talent, a lot of great players, a lot of numbers, a lot of highlights, no bowl. And that's a tragedy.
Sure is, man. Sure is, man. It's really sad, really devastating.